Okay, so Tina, can you demote our other guests?
That's good.
Right. Cindy, can I get you? Oh, wait, where's Bill Opal?
Oh, he's not yet. Let's see if he's in the attendee.
He was in the attendees, so I just promoted him.
Great.
Oh, excellent.
Tina.
Can't start anything without a lawyer. Am I right, Councilman Sanders? All right, Cindy, can I ask you to do our pomp and circumstance?
Absolutely. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act with the annual meeting notice advertised in the Trenton Times. The meeting notice was provided on Monday, January 18th to the Hunterdon County Democrat and the Trenton Times to various individuals on the listserv, department heads, and the city engineer and city attorney. This meeting will be recorded using Zoom, and the meeting agenda offers the planned action items of the governing body to the extent known at the time of publication.
Thank you so much. Can we do a roll call?
Councilwoman Lambert.
Here.
Councilman Sanders.
Here.
Councilman Stegman.
Here.
Council President Taylor.
Here.
Mayor Fall.
Here. Excellent. Can I ask everyone to rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd ask you to remain standing for a moment of silence for those in the United States Armed Forces and those who are serving on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you. Did we all get a chance to review the minutes from December 8th, December 17th, and December 22nd?
I did, Mayor, just to know, I was not present on December 8th, so I will be abstaining from that vote.
So I do think if that's the case, that we won't have a quorum to vote on those minutes. Bill, I'm going to ask you to lean in here because both of our new members of council won't be able to vote on any of these minutes. So if it's just Councilwoman Taylor and I who were present, do we have enough votes to vote those minutes?
I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I will, if we can table that, and I will get back to you.
All right, so that's December 8th, Councilman Sanders?
Yeah, and I apologize. I meant to give a heads up. I think that there's probably an exception for this kind of thing to have a less than a quorum, but we'll wait for Mr. Opal.
Yeah, I would just feel more comfortable if we get an answer on
that makes
this.
sense.
We'll vote on those minutes.
Okay.
So then, just as a reminder, Councilwoman Lambert, Councilman Stegman, you can't vote on minutes that you weren't present for.
Makes sense.
Okay. So then, can I get a motion to pass the December 17th open and closed sessions and the December 22nd open and closed sessions, please?
So moved.
Councilman Taylor for the first, Councilman Sanders for the second. Actually, you know what? Just to make this clean, I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Okay, you want a full roll call vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Councilwoman Lambert.
Abstain.
Councilman Sanders.
Yes.
Councilman Stegman.
Abstain.
Council President Taylor.
Yes.
Mayor Fall.
Yes. Okay, so we're gonna roll over the December 8th meeting minutes, or I guess we could swear in our old council members to approve it. All right. Okay, and then the January 5th reorganization, the retreat, and our closed session from the 15th will be available at our voting session in February. We're gonna try and keep that stuff off of our working sessions moving forward. All right, so we have several members of we have several resolutions within the consent agenda. Are there any questions from the council regarding the consent agenda?
I had one on resolution 31. The title references a resolution to cancel outstanding payroll checks. I'm assuming these are not payroll though.
No, they are payroll. They're payroll checks.
They are payroll.
They're uncashed payroll checks, and the only way to get them off of our books is to cancel them.
Some of them go back quite a way.
Right.
Yes, they
Yes.
do.
And the issue is that we have to continue to encumber those funds. So this is just basically housekeeping.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, understood. Yeah, I just wasn't sure that they were the amounts threw me off.
I just have a quick question. Is there a reason that some of these were held 7 or 8 years? I mean, is there some kind of process where we should be, maybe 2 years, 3 years, whatever, doing this process more quickly with these checks?
That's the goal, which is what we're doing now.
Oh, okay.
This is housekeeping.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions from council?
I have just one little question. In the past, the Environmental Commission was the green team for Sustainable Jersey, I believe, at least a long time ago when I was on it. So we're just setting up a green team separate from the Environmental Commission, although it does have representation.
Yes, that's correct. So we looked at other municipalities that had green teams, and we wanted to see more representation outside of the Environmental Commission on other stakeholders and decision makers. We had that conversation with the Environmental Commission chair and made sure that the right people from that team was on, but that we could expand to other, we thought, relevant commissions, committees, boards, and staff.
Okay, so, but it's just, my only comment, I deal with green teams a lot. This is, okay, no more than 13 members. So these are the required representatives that we can put other people on, because it does require quite a bit of work. So we'll need several people.
Yes. And if you're talking about the Sustainable Jersey grant at large, or the green team work beyond that?
Just green team work in general, Sustainable Jersey certification in general, and there's some new stuff that's not out yet that we'll probably want to think about in the future. So, but that's great,
Happy
13
to-
members. Good.
Yeah, happy to sort of, facilitate any conversation with the Environmental Commission if they need to start gearing up.
Yep, that's good, thanks.
Okay. So are there any other questions regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to pass resolution number 29, resolution 30, resolution 31, excuse me, resolution 32, resolution 33, resolution 34? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Councilman Stegman for the first,
Second.
Councilman Sanders for the second. Can I get an all in favor, say aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Oh, and I'm
Moving on.
sorry, I jumped the gun. I didn't see the end of consent agenda line. Apologies.
All good. I think that we've handled that. If there's anything else that you're concerned that the green team isn't doing, or that the Environmental Commission is, that's obviously, I actually think Liz is on this call.
No concerns. Just want to make sure we have enough room to put people on so that we have enough help. That's it.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry for, on resolution 35, then I see representatives. We're not naming folks, or we are naming folks today? I just see titles and I don't see a full list of 13 people. So we're voting.
We have space within those within the green team to to add folks onto that team as we go.
Yeah, I didn't say what I guess I'm trying to say, what are we voting? We're not actually voting on naming folks. We're naming on establishing it.
I'm sorry. I must just be misunderstanding your question. I don't understand.
Are we voting to name people tonight to that committee, specific people, or are we just establishing the committee or the team?
My understanding is just establishing the committee, and we need this for our Sustainable Jersey grant.
Okay.
They're to the point where they're uploading and getting us in a position for renewal.
Gotcha. So I didn't see any names, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, there are names on the next page.
Yes, so Keziah Groth Tuft is has been helping us with our Sustainable Jersey application for years. We've appointed Lester, Cindy, and then we're gonna ask for representation from the Environmental Commission from from the Shade Tree Commission. And then I would also like to see a council representative on this team. I know
But at
that,
this point, we don't know who those people are going to be. We're just establishing the green team.
correct,
Well,
but we
we've heard
are,
back from Environmental Commission, and that will be Liz. And I have not heard back from the other two, but they have not held their meetings this month.
Yeah, I just want to be clear on what we're voting on. That's all. Yeah.
yeah, but it may be worthwhile, since we started the discussion on this, to talk about who on the council we think would be a worthwhile representative to the green team. You know, as Council President Taylor mentioned, this is going to be a lot of work as we sort of strive for the next level from the Sustainable Jersey. Is there anybody who would be interested in helping us on that project over the course of the next year?
I don't know if I have enough time to be really useful, but I am willing to be a liaison to some
Yeah.
degree.
I mean, Council President Taylor, I hate to sort of poo-poo you volunteering, but we have, you and I have already established 3 other significant projects that we're working on besides our regular agenda work. So I just have some really serious concerns, particularly because you just mentioned how much extra work this is going to be.
No, I don't think I'd be the right person to be the main volunteer, but I'd be happy to help consult whatever I can be useful, because I spend a lot of time dealing with green team stuff in general. So
Yeah, I appreciate that. So is there anybody else who at this time would be willing to work with the Environmental Commission and the Green Team on our Sustainable Jersey work?
I could probably step up and give it a shot. I don't really have a lot of depth in this area, but you know, I'll give it a shot.
Okay, great. I really appreciate you doing that. So what we'll do is work with the Environmental Commission to get you, we'll set up a meeting with you and Liz McGill-Peer, and she can sort of talk to you about the process in Sustainable Jersey. And then, you know, this isn't a right away project, but as Councilwoman Taylor said, this is, you know, there's a pretty significant checklist. There's going to be a lot of work to do. So some of this is going to be, you know, recruiting the right volunteers to make sure that we get all of this done. So it doesn't fall on Cindy's lap for another year.
Mhm.
All right, excellent. Thank you again.
Mhm.
Okay. So can I get a motion to pass resolution number 35, establishing the green team and its participants?
So, second.
Okay, Councilman Sanders for the first, Councilwoman Lambert for the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Bills list. Can I get a motion to approve our bills list?
I have a couple of questions. Do you want to put a motion first?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Please ask your questions.
Yeah, just a few. It's just because I don't know what some of these folks are doing. The block line system, who are those folks?
Phone company.
That's a
Oh,
phone
Phone
company.
company,
Who is it?
Okay.
block line systems, and that's for the ones that we have to have POTS lines for, like for the elevator and, you know, we
Oh,
have
okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. No question there. Thank you for that. No question there, no question there.
Why? Oh, are you done, Councilman?
No, I'm going down my list and just asking the ones I just want clarity on.
I just have a general question, which I probably should have asked Cindy in advance, but I forgot. There were 2 separate lists. Is there a reason they're separated?
There is. One of them are things that we have to pay ahead of time prior to council. They're just your regular things like taxes and benefits. They all have to be paid or you start paying penalties. So that's the paid list. And then the other one is you have to authorize both.
Okay.
The other question I have is how is Princeton Hydro working on Swan Creek?
They are working on the grant.
Yeah, that's
Oh, okay.
regarding a grant that has to do with the old firehouse.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah, I remember that one now. Yes, thank you. And I think that is all I got. Thanks so much.
Okay, great. Can I get a motion to pass our bills list?
So moved.
Oh,
Councilman
either-
Sanders for the first, Councilwoman Lambert for the second. Can I get an all in favor, say aye?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye. Okay, so we have no ordinances on their first and second. Oh, I'm sorry, we have our board appointments. So as folks may recall from our last voting session, there was some concern about appointing Lieutenant Brown to the planning board pursuant to the statute on with the state. We have to have an officer of the city. So that was going to be the role that Lieutenant Brown filled. That role can also be filled by somebody who is a member of the Lambertville Municipal Utilities Authority. We worked with the chair to identify a person that didn't have any direct conflicts to also sit on the planning board, which turned out to be only 2 members. One member did agree to fulfill that position, and so we'll be appointing Paul Rotundi to the Class 2 position on the planning board. So can I get a motion to confirm Paul Rotundi in that position?
Can I make a comment first, Mayor, before we do the
Certainly.
vote? Yeah, just because we had a lot of constituent inquiries, at least I did anyway, regarding the appointment process and so forth. And you've said it, I just wanted to emphasize it, that the Class 2 category is driven by a state law, and the state law really limits the, who you can choose. It has to be, an official from the city. And there's certain interpretations as to what that means, but the pool from which we're selecting was actually, quite small. I just wanted to, I think folks thought we had freedom to name whomever. There was broad discretion as to who we named, and the eligibility for that category was actually fairly limited. I just wanted to note that. I'm happy to make a motion though.
Thank you. So I appreciate the comment, and Councilwoman Sanders for the first. Can I get a second?
Second.
Councilwoman Taylor for the second. All in favor of appointing Paul Rotundi to the planning board as a Class 2 in the Class 2 position, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay,
Does that round up all the appointments for the planning board now? Do we have
that's
a-
correct. Yes, we'll have a full planning board moving into February. Okay, so a couple of announcements, and then we'll crack into the business for this evening, which is our Human Rights Council recommendations for the council. We'll have our chair, Ronnie Todd Marino, and Lieutenant Brown give us a small presentation. Did the board receive the recommendations in advance?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, great. So I think the only things that I just want to announce really quickly, and then we'll move into that discussion, is dog and cat licenses are due February 26th. We have seen a slow declination in people registering their dogs and cats. So please do your civic duty. Uncle Sam wants you to register your dog and cat. And then parking stickers are expired in December. So if you if you want to continue to park in a metered parking space, contact the city for those permits. Okay, so Tina, can you elevate Ronnie and Lieutenant Brown?
Yes.
Okay, thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. All right. So before we start in the general discussion, I first want to just acknowledge how much work the Human Rights Commission has done here. I think this has been, everyone in the city of Lambertville and across the country were rocked by this summer's events. And I want to thank Ronnie Todd Marino and former Council President Beth Acero for leading what it was hours and hours of staff work, community outreach, direct public comments, and really think not just reacting to national events, but really putting them into the context of our city and thinking through what this means for the city of Lambertville. So I just want to thank everybody for their work here. I want to particularly thank Lieutenant Brown, who has been a partner on this, really since I became the mayor. Lieutenant Brown and I have been working on reaching out to marginalized communities, working on more community policing, and really connecting our police force into the city of Lambertville. So I know that this has been an incredible amount of work for your staff, Lieutenant Brown, as well as for the Human Rights Commission. I just want to recognize here that this was not done lightly or without thought, that the presentation that we're going to be hearing today is the result of significant manpower from our volunteers and from our staff. So with that, Ronnie, I'm going to kick it to you first to sort of talk about what that looked like, and then we can go from there.
Okay. All right. Well, my name is Ronnie Todd Marino, and I am the current chairperson of the Human Rights Council. And I thank you for having me and for the time and consideration as we look through these recommendations. As the mayor said, there was a lot of work on this, and I think it might be helpful to give some background, and information in terms of how we got to this point. The Human Rights Council was charged in June of 2020 with the task of really evaluating the role of the police in our community and any negative impacts on city residents, particularly people of color. And as the mayor said, this process took time. We really, and a lot of thought. We really reflected on our role in this review and sought a deeper understanding of the broad issues of racism and white supremacy in our nation, but more specifically in Lambertville. And, to speak to the amount of time, when we calculated, it was about 65 hours minimum of volunteer time dedicated to this effort. That includes the meetings and research and readings, conversations with subject matter experts, really reaching out to try to get as much information as we possibly could. And so all that work is represented in this document. I also definitely want to point out all the contributions from former Council President Beth Acero and thank her for all of her partnership in leading this. So again, to kind of put some context on it, our efforts started with Lieutenant Brown really sharing the efforts of the Lambertville Police Department that have been made over the last few decades to monitor and address issues, of racial profiling and to implement some progressive strategies, both as directed by the Attorney General and independently. So then we reviewed police statistics to determine if there was any evidence of disparate treatment of people of color. And I understand these reports are also in the packet in front of you. Our review process, we recognized pretty early on that it was limited. It's merely by the fact that although Lambertville Police Department collects demographic data and has for years regarding stops, all police stops, which is something that actually, I was surprised to learn that it's not required and it's not collected by many police departments. The way that it was captured, it wasn't digitally captured, so it wasn't as easy to access. So, it kind of limited our ability to look at statistics. But fortunately, the county prosecutor's office has allocated funding for an electronic dispatching system, CAD. So there's information that will be more easily captured uniformly and electronically, and that'll be really important in any ongoing reviews. But even with those limitations, the limitations of the statistic review, the Human Rights Council was easy, we were able to confirm that there were no egregious violations of human rights reflected in the Lambertville Police Department's police stops or arrests. And we saw no evidence of excessive use of force by the Lambertville Police Department. However, we fully recognize that, you know, effective anti-racism work isn't completed with a one limited review. And the council, you know, was very, you know, specific and dedicated to something that it wasn't a one and done. We wanted this to be an ongoing effort. And we advocate that deeper review of any systems and practices that support white supremacy. And that includes, but is not by any means limited to law enforcement. So that said, these recommendations aren't about correcting a violation. If it was, we would have been here a lot sooner. It's more about, and it's not about assigning blame, and it's not about guilt, where we put the responsibility of correcting our nation's long history of racism and white supremacy on our small community. But we know we can do better, and we're compelled to do better. We know that discrimination and oppression can be subtle, and we have a status quo that many have never questioned. So without that type of focused and humble effort, we can't successfully promote the change that's required to eliminate racism. So again, prior to authoring our recommendations, the Human Rights Council members researched and shared resources to really inform ourselves of the ideas that were coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement. Additionally, we wanted to get feedback from residents. So we hosted a listening session in October where we welcomed public input on the role of policing in our community and people's experiences. And so the minutes of that session were included also in the information that was forwarded to you. We learned through this process that there's public support for change. Again, you know, on this document, each of the recommendations is made within a context and really draws on some of the creative solutions that are proposed by Black Lives Matter and abolitionist leaders. So I want to give a brief overview of each, so that
Ronnie, before you go into the larger context, I think it bears, you know, if you don't mind me asking you a couple of questions here. So from the extensive research and time that the Human Rights Commission put into looking at data and statistics made available by our Lambertville Police Department, there was no evidence of any use of excessive force or issues or problematic use of excessive force. Is that right?
There was none that was apparent in the statistics.
Okay. And also there was no direct correlation between the Lambertville Police Department and any systemic racism in terms of, you know, either motor vehicle stops or arrest stops for that seem to, that would indicate systemic racism within our Lambertville Police Department.
I would not say that there was evidence of systemic racism, and I note that there's a commitment to continue to monitor for that. The police department is committed to doing that, and that's the only way that would be addressed and eliminated.
Yeah, and so I think, and one of the things that we had discussed in our meetings leading up to and sort of preparing for both the listening session and for you know, the conversations with the council, I thought it was interesting that where there is no direct correlation between these issues and our Lambertville Police Department, that there was some statistical indication that there was ongoing systemic racism of folks who called in police services from our community. Do you feel like that's a fair characterization?
I do. You know, that's an important distinction when there are when people are calling for police assistance. That's not something that the police are initiating. That's something that the police are responding to. And when people are calling on their neighbors, then that could reflect some racism within our community.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think I bring that up and ask about that just because I think it's really important to note here that a lot of what, if our goal here is to root out ongoing real systemic racism in our community, a lot of that is going to have to be education of the people who are within our community, in order for us to really address that.
I would agree.
Great. Okay,
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
certainly.
So
of
you're
course.
saying there's evidence of racism in the calls, meaning that there are more calls from white people about people of color?
There is evidence that when there's complaints, that there's a higher percentage of people of color identified in that than there are in the general population within Lambertville. So, and again, this is broad stroke review that really would benefit from a deeper review when there's more information available through that electronic system.
And I think that it's also important to note here that the, while there is data being collected and there's already data being collected and that data is being provided, that also the N or the total number of portions of data that we can collect in terms of police calls, there's not a grand swath of arrests, of stops, right? The police department, in terms of the actual reportable action, we have only a small set of data in order that we can look at here, right? So if we have 4, potential arrests within a month, right? That one could say that's 25% of all arrests, right? But it's really just 1 in 4 arrests. So we want to be really careful about how we are, as we're starting to aggregate and make this data available to the public, that we're doing that in a way that is contextual with the size and scope of not only the Lambertville Police Department, but the city of Lambertville itself.
Just follow up on Council President Taylor's question, 'cause I'm not quite sure I understand now after the answer. So the data is as to the target or who is being suggested should be investigated. There was a higher incidence of people of color. Is that what you were saying, or was it that the people who were calling were was it commenting at all on the people who made the calls, or just it was the race or ethnicity of that person not available? Sorry, did I say that? Am I freezing up here?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah.
I think that's the question that, Bear is asking. The question here is, or Councilman Sanders, maybe I can rephrase your question, which is the race of the caller also indicated in the call?
That's a question for Lieutenant Brown.
Lieutenant Brown?
Sure. Again, some call, the 911 dispatcher does not include the race when they take the phone call. It will only if the officer had interaction with the complainant. And I would say, again, every situation is a little bit different. Probably, 60 to 7%, the officer does have interaction with the complainant, and the other percentage-wise is anonymous complaints where we would not have an interaction. But just one note, we are aware of that this could occur or does occur. So there is precautions that we take with that, Mayor. And so one of them is, especially just throw one out, if it's a noise complaint or whatever type of complaint, the officer attempts to investigate that prior to making even contact with the accused or whoever, however you want to put it. So if we don't have that any suspicion or probable cause that this is occurring, the officer most likely will not make contact with that person. So we're aware of that, and again, moving forward, has become more aware of it now in the last 6 months. So we make sure we do address that or attempt to address it and by moving forward. And but like I said, the data wouldn't be 100% because, again, if you get the anonymous complaints, which probably like 60 to 70% we do, you're not going to have that data available.
Right. And I think this is an important point here, because while we asked the Human Rights Commission to look into specifically, addressing concerns from the community around our police, that is not the only thing that we've done here. We've actually engaged with the library as well to do a series on thinking about race and oppression and the social justice issues as a community. And that's something we've committed to do over the next year. We're going to be working with members of our community, continue to do some of that education and outreach to community members, because this is, I think it's important for us to sort of look not just at one portion of this, but as Ronnie noted, that this is really an opportunity for us to root out systems of racism. And this is the, that is not a one solution option. So I think it's just important to note here that the city is not just looking at the police department, but actually trying to take a more holistic and education based look at that work. But this is, again, ongoing.
Just
So-
one quick point, if I could, Mayor. I'll be very quick. I just think we have to be really careful about data and context, and transparency is good, but if we put out data that's whatever, 80% of all traffic stops were of white people, but Lambertville is 95% white or whatever the number is, it just, the people can interpret this in a really incorrect fashion. So providing context, or even really thinking about what we publish, I think is going to be really important, because I think that data can really lead people in a bad direction if it's not contextualized properly.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so that was actually one of the questions that I had if you move into one of the recommendations from the Lambertville Human Rights Commission, or Human Rights Council, excuse me. One of their recommendations was to release monthly data regarding stops, and one of my concerns that I had mentioned with both Ronnie and Lieutenant Brown was that, because we have so few interactions in that particular arena, that I have some real concerns about that data getting skewed, because there just isn't enough data to make statistically relevant notions from it, right? So again, if we only arrest 4 people in the city of Lambertville in a month, you could claim that 1/4 of those arrested were named Julia, right? That's not necessarily that's not actually necessarily relevant or indicative of real issues. And so one of my recommended changes to this document would be instead to do either quarterly or biannually reports of this data, in order to create a larger set of data. So I guess, we can either talk about that a little bit, or we can have Ronnie go through and contextualize some of the recommendations that they're making here. This is, I don't know if you want to continue that conversation, Councilman Sanders.
No, I mean, I sort of agree. Well, I think I agree with at least part of your point there. I just do think that I'd want to make sure that whatever data we're publishing, we have some degree of confidence with some expertise, provided to us, that it tells an accurate story. The size sample is going to be important in that, but there's other information. I'm not quite sure publishing all sorts of information is necessarily going to be helpful or direct us. I think we need to look at data, but what we publish, I think we have to give a real close thought to what that is, to make sure that it's not misinterpreted. That's all.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of specific recommendations on either who you might want us to go seek out that recommendations from, what experts you'd like us to talk to, or, if there's other, how can we sort of concretely move forward on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I'm a big fan of our Attorney General, and I do think that if there's guidance from the Attorney General's office regarding like what they publish or their best practices, I do think there's probably some civil rights groups that we may want to talk to. about something like this, but I'd like to get a sort of give it some more thought. But I do think that some input just to make sure that we're pushing out meaningful information and not stuff that leads folks down the wrong path anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, I was going to bring up the point of the Attorney General as well. But when we talk about rooting out racism, what does that mean? I mean, I can understand from an employee standpoint, like the police, the people that work in the city, but so we're going to identify the people who make the calls and find out if the calls are racist in nature, and then if you do that,
No,
you
Councilman
mentioned,
Stegman, I think, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there because I just don't want to.
yeah, please, yeah.
Roll
Yeah.
down a path where we're.
No, I know, I don't either. But if you could,
Yeah,
what do you
so
mean by root out, though?
I think what the Human Rights Commission was trying to accomplish here was to identify areas in which we can improve as a community. I certainly don't mean that we are going to identify individuals as a member of our government, but that we as thought leaders and as policy directors within our community have an opportunity and a responsibility to address what we know to be a national conversation about race in every one of our communities. So I think that's what our goal is here. I'm just a little concerned about what the path that you're sort of heading down here.
No, I just wanted
We have a
to,
very specific
yeah, no,
agenda today, which is to address the Human Rights Commission's recommendations specifically on our police department. And my recommendations were that while this is one portion of what the national conversation has been talking about, we have quite a few other issues that we as policy leaders have to address in order to continue to, improve our communities and make them safe for everyone to live here. I think the conversation on the police is really just the pinhead of a much larger conversation about our communities and how we can make them safe, welcoming, and healthy places to live for.
oh, I have no argument with that.
Great.
But I just said when you use the word root out, it was troubling. But now that you've explained, what you mean, I mean, education is a huge part. I can see us not only working with with the library, but also the school system to address this concern as well. I think that's really important.
Well, luckily we have with us tonight not only our Human Rights Commission director, but also a member of the school board.
Perfect. I
Okay.
was, yeah, that,
Let's
yeah.
continue.
Yeah, and I will note that I'm sorry if there was questions before I go back to this, but
No,
I should note that some of the, like, as we develop these recommendations, there were specific recommendations regarding youth. Part of the work that the Human Rights Council does is review potential bias crimes with the police, recently over recent years, we've seen an increase in the pattern of bias crimes with adolescents. So we had some specific ideas for programming, but because those were more directed to the school district, we didn't include them in this document specifically. But there is some crossover and there's some relevance, especially the concern about the potential negative impact of the presence of the Class 3 officers in the school on children of color. And the reports that they are being used for discipline, despite the early promises to the city council included, that would not be their role. So that issue may come before city council, but it wasn't on this document specifically because it wasn't specifically a recommendation to city council.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also just like to note, I mean, I do think it's important that the issue of the Class 3 officer does come back before council, because that was a very contentious conversation and vote. And we put some, and I think it was Councilman Sanders who came up with the language. We did put some, excuse me, good night, sweetie. Sorry, family interlude.
Future council, future council.
Oh, man. Anyway, we had put some sort of some guidelines there.
Yeah.
We wanted to hear reporting back out, and we've heard nothing.
And maybe Mayor, can I make a
Please,
statement
yeah.
on this? We've had no complaints in reference to the Class 3 police officer at LPS, and nothing's come through. I've attended the Human Rights Council meetings. I don't think I've missed one yet in the last 2 years. However, we have had no complaints in reference to the Class 3 at the Lambertville Public School. And maybe Ronnie, you can, if it was at a different school, we need to address that. But we're talking about within the city of Lambertville. And I would definitely, if there was, Councilman Sanders, if there was an issue, I would definitely jump on it because the Class 3 officer and the principal at LPS, I have a good working relationship, and it's a hardcore line that I've stipulated with them that the policies be followed with them, or they'll be removed from the school.
I don't think I haven't heard any concerns, honestly, but I think what Council President Taylor was referencing was that as part of the vote, we did set up sort of as conditions of approval. Maybe that's a little strong, but we did articulate some things that we would like to hear back on. And I don't have them at my fingertips, but we were, I think, requesting or requiring a reporting out of after a year and a half, I can't quite remember, as to how it went, what that person was doing and so forth. So I will, as a follow-up, go back and pull our resolution and the conditions that we set in there. And because I do think it's probably, it's something that we required or requested as part of that vote. And we probably should do some follow-up to make sure that that reporting out happens.
Okay, I'm happy to follow up on that. I do know that, from my conversations with Principal Quinones, as well as, conversations with the new superintendent, I have also heard no concern about the Lambertville Class 3 officer. I was also a part of the hiring for that position and was very pleased at the caliber of officer that we received for that role in particular. I mean, he is, a specialist that has dealt with childhood abuse and trauma, which is I think a worthwhile expert to have in a school. He also has been, as in the before times in COVID, he has been a real ambassador. I have seen him at every arrival and dismissal, and from all of the conversations that I've had from school officials, I've heard no concern or complaint. So,
yeah, and again, it wasn't about hearing complaints. It was about those conditions, which I think went in part to what the hiring preferences would be, which it sounds like those were followed, and then also just the experience and a reporting out. So
I'm happy to follow up on that and have that as a part of our next working session. Or we may need to get some time to
Sure.
formalize those reports. But I would just like to say the Class 3 officer wasn't a part of the discussion, the agenda that we had
Understood.
in terms of, direct council recommendations, although I'm happy to formalize a report. Okay.
I just have a question about the topic of this, collecting data, publishing data, and the relative sample size, and, kind of giving the wrong impression. I think collecting data is very important, but I agree that we could be skewing the message because of the sample size. Are there other considerations that should be given to raising visibility that don't necessarily involve publishing just data? I'm not even sure what those would be, but I mean, maybe we can find a different way to do it and use the data to sort of support the other, support the message in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, Councilman Lambert, I think that's a really interesting idea. Could I just ask you to sort of give a little bit more context for the Lambertville Human Rights Commission. Like, what exactly do you mean? So if we don't publish the data, what would you like to, what do you think would be the
Well,
right
I'm
thing?
asking that question because I don't know if there are other things. I don't know if what other small communities may be doing, or it was mentioned, the Attorney General's office might have guidance as to ways that you can not just have the data deliver the message, but I mean, data is important and it needs to be there and it should be collected, but I'm just trying to, I don't know, I'm almost like asking people to brainstorm about it. I don't have a specific suggestion, just something to think about.
Yeah, I will note here that the Lambertville Police Department has been really on the forefront of a lot of progressive policies around not just data collection. We were one of the first, if not the first, Hunterdon County municipality to have body cams. We were aggregating this data on racial and ethnic ethnicity for stops, decades before other members, most municipalities in Hunterdon County still aren't doing that.
Right.
So I do want to just note here that we are really at the forefront. So there are not going to be a lot of other communities that we can look to for more progressive ideas. And in fact, at the beginning of my term, in 2019, I met with mayors from Clinton, Princeton, from Frenchtown, Collingswood, and multiple other sort of small, progressive, like-minded municipalities, and specifically asked questions about, what can we be doing to be better, more community focused. How can we sort of continue to have a community focused police department? And what I found out is that actually we were really doing more than most of those other communities.
So maybe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. So I was just going to say, unfortunately, unlike in other areas of our of municipal government where we are not sort of forging at the very front line, with our police department, and specifically around community policing and community focused service provision, there are very few people that we can look to.
So maybe we find a way to use our early adoption practices to kind of lead into what the data tells us. And it sends a message that we're proactive and we're trying to do the right thing. And we're looking for continually to improve our situation.
Yeah, I mean, maybe instead of just generally publishing, to try and get to a concrete point here, maybe instead of generally publishing data for just the general public, that quarterly the Lambertville Human Rights Commission reviews this data, rather than it just being sort of published online for various, to sort of be manipulated as needed. And that this is just becomes part and parcel of a quarterly or biannual review with folks that are interested in, in advocating for human rights and working towards, human rights in our community. And that way we don't have to worry about just sort of throwing data out there that's contextless, because we have a human rights commission that has really seeped themselves in this work.
And I guess the data that's collected will help craft programs to address what the data says without necessarily the data driving as itself being put out there and misinterpreted. So what I'm kind of saying is, we find out what the problem is through whatever we're doing with the data, and then we come up with a program to address whatever that shows us and craft our message that way.
Well, unfortunately, Councilman Stegman, I would agree with you, right? That the best possible thing to do is to have the data show us what the problem is and then address whatever problem needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, from the extensive research that we've done with the Lambertville Police Department and the Lambertville Human Rights Commission, there is no problem of excessive force or systemic racism within our Lambertville Police Department. So,
Right.
but I do feel like there has been a call from the community to address this, regardless of the fact that there is no direct data that supports that there is a problem within our Lambertville Police Department.
Well, I think, I mean, in an effort to move us on a little bit, a couple things to point out. One, just to reiterate, the data shows, the data that we have show that problems with excessive force and racism that can be easily discerned from the data, those aren't there. Those aren't the issues. I also don't think, I'm sure we'll hear in a little bit, but I don't take it that the folks who are really passionate about this and have been very vocal about this, I don't think that those sort of high level issues are the biggest ones. I think there's a much more philosophical view here that we need to take into account. I have a couple questions about the actual recommendations that have been made. Ronnie, I'm not sure, were we planning to have Ronnie go through each of these, or were we going to ask our own questions? How did we plan to move this ahead?
Yes, I'm sorry about that, Council President. Thank you for getting us back on track here. Ronnie, do you want to briefly walk through what each of these recommendations are, and then the council can ask questions as we go?
Yeah, I'd like to. I think that would help. I think one of the things that helps also is recognizing how it's structured, that like the first page is really about recommendations that we're making specifically to City Council, but then we also included in there the Lambertville Police Department goals. So that's the second sheet is their goals. And then the third sheet is the Human Rights Council goals for 2021. I think, it's important. We thought it was important for you to see how each group is taking responsibility to lift this effort and to support the efforts. I think people also have questioned why the police were included in this work. And it is important to continue to highlight that the police department has been a part of the Human Rights Council since its inception. And Lieutenant Brown has really been actively involved for years in identifying solutions and throughout this process and demonstrated a commitment to this work. So I think that's significant. So some of the recommendations we're making, would take a lot of research and efforts to implement. And so this is meant to be like about a collaboration where the Human Rights Council would assist in any way that you see fit if any or all of these recommendations were implemented. So okay, so I guess now we should just take a look at the document, and I can share my screen.
Cindy, can we make sure that Ronnie can share her screen?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I think she should be able to.
She should be able to now.
Should. It's always a matter of, and where is that?
Whoa.
I'm not seeing the button that sometimes.
The share screen would be on the bottom where you would see mute, start video, participants, share screen, raise hand.
You got to move your cursor down to the bottom to light it up.
Kind of over
There
it.
we go. It was, I had the screen minimized. So, all right, here we are. Apologize. Okay. So, again, this first page of the document is really about our recommendations for this year to City Council. And if you looked at this, the first category is really about, it's about increasing communication with underrepresented populations within our city. We know that, decision making, particularly around anti-racism work, is only meaningful if we have input from stakeholders, and it isn't based on assumptions. So this is something that we think is sort of the beginning of the work, and it's required. And any decision that the city makes is going to be more effective if it takes into account the experiences and opinions and ideas of all segments of the city population. But we know that that's a challenge. It can be very difficult, particularly with Latinx residents. So, the Human Rights Council is willing to support these efforts and would host annual events, which if a lot of the recommendations that we have here, I also made sure that we had in the goals as well for the Human Rights Council, because this isn't, again, it's a collaborative effort. So it would be to host regular events and to help develop a communication mechanism that would allow you to get like feedback on any like current city programs and services, or on future goals and projects where you want to get input from a diverse segment of the population. It's basically meant to be a tool at your disposal to gather information from residents. And it would be tapping into like the partnerships with groups that are already a trusted resource for the community. That would include nonprofits like Fisherman's Mark or the library and schools and churches. Okay.
I don't know if we're commenting on these as we go along, but this is, Ronnie, this seems like a very good recommendation, and I think a good start and foundation for the work that we do here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the work that Lieutenant Brown and Fisherman's Mark has done in previous years of reaching out to our Latino population to make sure that we do events like the Know Your Rights events have been well attended in previous years, but that this, getting to a more, direct feedback, I think is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this previously. I agree with this. I think this is great, but once or twice a year is not sufficient. And I think we really need a much more robust system that is developed in a way that works for the people we're trying to develop it for, as opposed to working for us. A feedback system that is not just these big events, but where we hear from community leaders, we identify the community leaders. So we're really understanding the lived experience of people who are facing some of these problems. That's something I was hoping this council would be able to work on a little more last year. Last year was last year. So now I think it's really incumbent upon us to, nobody wants more meetings, but figure out what it is. Is it an informal group? Is it something organized through Fisherman's Mark? I don't know exactly what it is, but I'm happy to work on it. And I think it's really important that we allow people who want to have a direct voice to speak up.
Thank you, Council President. I think one of the things that may be interesting for us to explore here is having an opportunity, because I know that this is sort of our first opportunity to grapple with these recommendations, would be to think on these and respond back to things that we think should be significantly edited or changed to the Human Rights Council. So, for instance, concerns about data, or concerns about, rather than just doing these large events, having a more direct network within not just the Latino population, but marginalized communities in the city. So we'll try and get some more concrete examples of what we think how that should be implemented. And then I think that would go back to the Human Rights Commission to figure out how it was implemented.
That would be great. Okay. Any other questions about that before I go to the next section?
Please.
Okay. So in terms of broadening community services, this whole category sort of comes from some specific questions and challenges that have been raised by the Black Lives Matter movement, where it's really asking communities to question a status quo that is in place that perpetuates racism and white supremacy. And that it first questions, there's sort of a basic question of why city budgets invest in policing and incarcerating people over preventative services. So our recommendation for this expansion of case management comes from a concern that there are a lot of people who go into crisis because of a lack of resources and difficulty in navigating a very complex support system. We know that COVID places even more families in financial crisis. So the need for more professional system navigation has grown. And that it's preventative because those kind of services reduce crime by connecting people to help that they need before a crisis. I'll give an example of like someone who's experiencing a mental health crisis that may have been avoided if they had had assistance in getting adequate health care coverage and prescription coverage so that they could afford to take their medications. Or if a person has a substance use disorder and needs treatment, but doesn't have transportation to get to the treatment facility. You know, those are things that, you know, even when there's great resources and there's programs available, which sometimes there are and sometimes there aren't, there's 100 very real barriers that people face when they're trying to access services. So professional case management helps to navigate those barriers. The city provides case management and employs Bambi Cool, she has a couple different roles where she's 24-hour support for crisis situations, you know, that she's contacted, particularly when people need access to emergency shelter. What we're recommending is an expansion in terms of the number of case management hours that's provided, and that there's the referral, a formal referral process so that people are linked to help as soon as they're asking for help.
Yeah, and I think that this is really important. Since I saw this, these recommendations, one of the things that we are committing to doing is working with Hunterdon Healthcare, which provides a service to municipalities for crisis management and crisis care. They do that service with municipalities to ensure that this type of social work is done in conjunction with the municipality, and so that when those crises happen, that they are directly connected to, you know, trained operatives within their within the hospital system. You know, Hunterdon also has you know, case managers that specifically work in you know, rape and sexual assault crisis. You know, I think one of the things that is a reality of our situation here in the city of Lambertville versus you know, our progressive neighbors to the semi-south of us. You know, Mercer County and Hunterdon County have very different county-wide systems in terms of just overall, you know, Ronnie, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. You know, the amount of social services, case management, access to service, the difference between Mercer County and Hunterdon County is like we are living in different worlds. And so, you know, we are going to make a commitment, as long as the council sees fit here, to really ensure that we are not just relying on Bambi Cool, but taking advantage of these other contracted services with Hunterdon Healthcare and other county services. Are there any questions about that from the council?
Yeah, I have just a quick question. So, Ronnie, does the Human Rights Council envision these expanded services being coordinated through our current provider, through I guess through Bambi, or through a central resource? Or like, have you given it that kind of thought, like how it would be structured to make sure that, you know, there's coordination and synchronization?
Do you mind
if
Ronnie, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I take a quick crack at that before we ask about the human, just because this is directly a staff issue, right? Okay. So, you know, the way in which the Human Rights Commission, I believe, has sort of asked us to consider, how do we contract to provide an expanded case management and provide more access to social services, right? And so my recommendation was that Bambi, Bambi doesn't incredible job with very, very little in our
Yeah.
community, that we were going to double down on the services, those contracted services outside of the city. So that was sort of my recommendation as the director of the staff.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Right, so the Human Rights Council was recommending the expanded case management, acknowledging that there's services already provided, but not necessarily, recommending specifics for how that would happen. It could be hiring additional staff. It could be expanding Bambi's hours, or it could be contracting with another agency. That really, would be up to you in terms of what, where that fits within the city budget and what's the most efficient and effective way.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up question if I can. So what happens now if there's a crisis? The folks call 911 and the police respond, and that's pretty much the way it's set up? If there's a crisis?
Well, I'll kick that over to Lieutenant Brown, but we actually have a pretty robust system here where if people are in need of counseling or crisis services, that if somebody calls 911, our first responders are the police department, but
Right.
that we, work directly with Bambi, and Bambi is on 24-hour call if this is not a violent emergency, right, that we are connecting them to the services that are available.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Lieutenant Brown, did I get that right? I don't want to speak here for you.
No, and we have additional, we have a mobile outreach that will respond out from Hunter and Healthcare if it's a non-emergency or a non-violent situation. And so we use them along with Bambi. So we do have, we do use those two options, Councilman.
So are we looking to formalize the process more? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
I feel like I should be specific on this too, because this is about expanded case management, which is different from crisis management. It's about sitting down and doing paperwork with people. It's a lot less glamorous, where it's helping people understand what they're eligible for and helping them figure out how they're going to get childcare when they have to go to meet with their immigration attorney. So it's a little bit different than some of the services, like the mobile outreach from Hunter and Healthcare is about when somebody's a danger to themselves or others. That's crisis services. This is much more paperwork, and so it's a little bit different.
I think you said it well originally, Ronnie. I mean, just the folks go through enormous challenges in trying to, just very practical challenges like, transportation services and childcare issues, and trying to get services that they need and trying to navigate the social safety net, that does it exist, and can it help them, and how do we remove those barriers? And you really need an advocate, and
somebody who knows the system, understands
Yep.
the eligibility, knows that if you don't go with these documents in hand, you won't get the help
You
that
won't
you
get through.
need, and you'll have to make another appointment and wait. So, there's a lot to be said. And obviously I communicate this with passion because I've done this for a lot of my my career, and I see that there's very real barriers that people experience if they don't have that professional resource. So it's
Yeah,
about
absolutely. And I think, it's just important to really hit home here that we are at a great disadvantage for existing in Hunterdon County. Those services are harder to get to. The transportation is worse. There's just the social safety net is made more difficult. And I think it, as we continue to have this conversation, because we have so many impassioned volunteers who have sort of raised their hand about this, that we really need to be advocating to the county to ensure that those services are expanded.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, and so the next recommendation about developing and managing, with the support of the Police Department and Human Rights Council, that community dispute resolution. We had some reports from Lieutenant Brown that a lot of police calls are repeat calls for neighbor disputes. And so, that's something that's, we recognize that the police role is about addressing an immediate safety situation, an immediate crisis. It's not about like long-term, like helping with interpersonal relations. Like that's not what they're there to do. So this is about, like having a program that specifically goes beyond the crisis and helps, resolve those disputes and improve neighbor relationships, and then ultimately reduce police calls for this type of service. And, the next one is the alternate crisis response team is another idea that really has recently gained some mainstream attention, although there are some programs and teams that have been operating for decades. And it's based on the idea that there are times when police are called to provide a service or address a need when they may not be the best provider of that support, and their presence may escalate a situation. So basically, this is a team. There are teams of trained medical and mental health professionals that are dispatched as an alternate to police, or in addition to police when there isn't an immediate safety risk, but there's mental health or substance abuse or neighbor dispute. And we're really like, this recommendation is where, is about understanding information that's coming out of some of the larger pilot programs for this. There's a lot of cities that are implementing this. So even just in the past 6 months, it went from information out there about just a couple groups. Now, there's, my understanding is like there's Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is starting one, and the New York City has implemented a very large pilot program in it. So I think it bears researching and understanding if this is something that would meet the unique needs of our community, or could meet the unique needs of our community. But again, because we would need to do a lot of research in order to do it. The recommendation is that there just be joint effort to explore it and understand with the experiences of these new programs coming out.
Yeah, I think from my understanding in researching this, that I have not been able to find a single community in the state of New Jersey that, even in communities that had a version of these joint response, that had no police as a part of this response team. And there are very few versions of this throughout the country. So I agree that this just bears some watching and research.
Yeah, I think it's evolving. I know that there's a team in Asbury Park that is looking to really build the program and be a part of that alternate dispatch, a formal process. So I think that we'll see a lot more over the coming year about those successes and get a better understanding of how it could potentially work. And that last recommendation here is just a commitment to annual anti-racism training that would be across all departments, just, that really teaches those tools that are necessary to do that sort of self-exploration and anti-racism work within every department. So, okay, so then I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Brown so that he can go through his department goals.
Great, Lieutenant.
Sure. The first one is dealing with the Attorney General's office, and that's a good start because we've been seeing if a couple of you have been following the Attorney General's webinars, they've had a lot of listening sessions, and there's a lot of stuff that's coming out of the AG's office on changing policies within the state. And we all know that, just give a little insight, the Attorney General in New Jersey, all of our core policies are issued by the Attorney General's office. So in different states, Pennsylvania is a good record since they're real close to us. Each municipality comes up with their own policies. So New Jersey, it's pretty strict. The Attorney General has core policies, and so they're the ones that put it out to the municipalities and to the counties. And then, but moving forward, we know the Attorney General has already changed the use of force policy. So that use of force policy, prior to even what was changed, was one of the most restrictive use of force policies in the whole country. And that's even, so now that's even going more moving forward. That use of force policy, along with that use of force policy, the Attorney General has mandated at this point so far at least 16 hours of additional training this year, just on the new policy that's going to be issued out. So, and he's moving forward correctly on this. So he's doing the training prior to issuing out the policy. So we're not issuing out policies where officers aren't trained, and we're not setting goals that we can't meet. And that's always the one thing that you want to look at when you're changing policies. What are your goals, and can they be met, right? So, so we're looking at the Attorney General, and when the Councilman Sanders put out about the motor vehicle stops and data, I spent about 2 hours today. Actually, I had to leave one of our city meetings for it, but we discussed with the prosecutor's office, with all the police chiefs, how we're going to implement a countywide policy for tracking race data. And they're using there's actually, right now, there's 2 police departments in the county, Lambertville and Clinton Township, that tracks that data. And so they're using our, the policy that we have set up here, they're using that as one of the examples of how they're moving forward with this. And when you're dealing on the county level, it's going to take a little bit more time and they're to get everything implemented. However, they're using us and our policy, how we're going to track it. And make a note on that, we've been tracking that since 2005, race data. And back then, when we first started, it was not electronic and it was all handwritten daily activity sheets. And this goes back to when state police policies were issued out. So we followed the same suit as the state police for documenting race and on motor vehicle stops and pedestrian stops. And we followed through with that. And so with the, when we said we changed things, we made it 2 years ago, we implemented an electronic system to track the race and data, so I can pull that data up pretty easily and quickly. So that's some of the ways that we've already changed how we're documented, but that information is still there. And I don't see much of that information changing, meaning how we obtain that information, because we're getting all the race, we're getting the reason for the stop. So moving forward, I think we're still ahead of the game on that, and we're still continuing with that. Same as the body cameras. Even prior to that, the in-car cameras, we were the first in the county to have in-car cameras. So when I came here back in 1995, we had already had a car that had an in-camera system. And again, they're not cheap. They're very expensive to put in for every vehicle you get because they're modified for that vehicle. But it's something that we decided from back then was each marked police car that we have has the in-camera video system in it. And same for the body cameras. When they first were put out, we jumped right on the grant for the body cameras, and at no cost, we were able to outfit our officers with the body-worn cameras. So moving on, Mayor, did you want to, in case somebody had any questions, do you want me to keep moving on, or?
I think the council will break in if they have any questions for him. Yeah.
Okay, good. Second on the list of that we'd like to see is the continued follow-up and less lethal force options, right? So we talked about goals, what we want to give to police officers. If we don't have options for the officers, we're putting them in a no-win situation. So if we're only giving them options of lethal force options, and that's where we end up at. So we have to continue to look at the less lethal force options, and New Jersey has slowly, I would say slowly, implemented that more than other states have moved ahead on the less lethal force options. And then even when we're talking about mental health, I know there's about 5 years ago, they implemented the TASER program. New Jersey never had TASER less lethal force options, with the exception of OC and the baton. So moving forward, we saw the advocacy groups for mental health say, hey, look at the options that we have here. You're not giving your officers options for less lethal force. So we saw the implementations of the TASER, And that hasn't really moved too far forward with it. With other states, tasers falls in the same less lethal force as like OC. But we haven't seen that move yet by the AG's office, but we might see it moving forward in the next coming years.
Oh, we don't have taser training or use tasers.
No, it's very in New Jersey. If you look at the policy, it's very, very restrictive for tasers. Tasers are mostly used for deadly force situations, so at this time, there's really I don't want to go into too much. Nobody in the county, patrol officers do not have tasers in our county. They're very restrictive and like I said, but they were, again, I think that was one thing that the state's going to have to look at, giving that another force option for the officers.
Has there been any events where you thought to yourself, oh, it would have been great to have a taser to get in this instance?
Definitely, anytime that you use any less lethal means, meaning anytime that I have used OC or even had to go to physical hands-on with anyone, I feel it's always nice to have another less lethal means so you don't have to go, if it does escalate, go to deadly force. So to answer your question, yes, Councilman, we have had situations where it's been nice to have the tasers, and we see it even in our sister community in New Hope that has tasers. They are very useful. So anyway, moving on to the next line item that we have. Just give a little background information for the scheduling that we have. We changed scheduling about 2 years ago. We worked a 4 on, 2 off, 8.5 hour schedule. Well, that within the state of New Jersey, I think we went through the whole country. I think we were maybe one of the last police departments that worked with 8 hour schedule. So we finally switched over. Most departments work now as a 12 hour schedule, and we finally did do a 12 hour schedule. But by doing that, we did get extra hours out of officers. But what we lost was the way we had the other schedule we had at least one supervisor on that covered the squad. So right now, I have 2 shifts or 2 squads that do not have supervisors, and they work alone. I mean, they don't have a supervisor at all. So, so that's something that's one thing where we're lacking, I would say, in Lambertville, that we're not in the forefront, because other police departments in the county, when they went to the 12 hour schedules, they did do intermediate supervisors that have somebody that oversees the squad and is responsible for the actions of other officers. That's very important. We saw that in the last several years when you review the use of force situations, and when they went bad, a lot of the situations, there was no supervisor on site. So it's something that we can do pretty quickly, which I'm advocating for, and then moving forward with it. So that's really an easy thing that we can do to fix. It's going to help our situation out here in Lambertville.
That would mean, how would you fix it?
By creating 2 additional intermediate supervisors, meaning they would be both other police departments, and I see even happening here, there's 2 corporals that oversight the 2 squads where there's no sergeants on. So they're accountable. Again, the use of force, we looked at use of force policy, pursuit policy, bias incident policy, they all go back to the supervisor that's on the shift, and they're responsible for what type of investigation occurs. And in a small police department, you don't have, again, with the schedule that we have, there's not a sergeant on every squad.
So there's not enough, you're saying there's not enough personnel?
Not personnel, just supervisors. We got I think right now we're satisfied with the staffing that we have right now. It's just the supervisor. We have to obtain meeting. We have to have 2 supervisors to cover the 2 squads.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me, Lieutenant, would that mean that existing staff would have additional responsibility of supervision? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, again, we by collecting this data we talked about, now it's all computerized, right? It's on. I have Excel sheets. We can easily look at what type of the race data for motor vehicle stop, pedestrian stops, and we review them. We've implemented reviewing them monthly. So each supervisor reviews the periodically throughout the month. So there's a set amount of incidents where the supervisors, first of all, reviews the data that we have now, which is electronic, which is much easier. Prior to that, they were looking at the data. They're actually log sheets. Officers do log sheets, mark down the race and reason for stops. So they've been doing that. They were doing that, but now it's much easier to do with it being electronically. Plus, they review the body worn cameras, spot checks. Like I said before, there's times that there's not supervisors working, or the supervisor's not on the call, right? Because officers don't always respond with a two officers always respond to the call. So they actually review the body camera. So that's actually, the body cameras made that a lot easier to be able to do that. So they periodically throughout the month are required to check the review body cameras. And it was kind of the same, the state, we don't want to recreate the wheel here, but it was the same thing that the state police have implemented several years ago, also reviewing the in-camera car cameras for motor vehicle stops. Okay, so the next one, moving on. Would city assistants prioritize recruitment of a Spanish-speaking officer, preferably an individual from the Latinx population? So we've been looking at that for years, right? We've since I started back in 1995, we were the first police department in the county to have a female officer. And from that moving on, as soon as she just retired 3 or 4 years ago, we went out. We were able to find another female officer, and so we have also a female officer again. So
we also had a mounted police officer.
We did.
Yeah, because she was a mount. She had
the horse, but the horse, yeah, the ram, yeah. But I was back to Spanish. So we've been trying to reach again because we have the makeup of Lambertville. We've been always trying to look for a Hispanic officer, and actually, what it came to, we actually hired one last month, and we hired a Hispanic officer in December. His being able to speak Spanish is limited. However, he's continuing to work on that. But we did hire our first Hispanic officer December 1st. So I want to make that announcement today. I think it's the first time that we've made that announcement at the council meeting. So
he's in training now?
Yes, sir. So moving on to the continuing de-escalation training, along with race and gender training. Now that falls into something that we decided to do it's about 10 years ago. We started with it was a program called the CIT program. It's a 40-hour program that one of the prosecutor's office in another county decided to start off with, and it's grown throughout the whole state now. So the prosecutor office mandated, I forget, a percentage of your department had to be trained in CIT work, which is part of de-escalation. And so we took it a little bit further. We mandated that the whole entire department receives that training. So we took that on like 5 years ago. And so every member of the police department is trained with out of the CIT program. And which I find when I attended the program, it was one of the best programs that I was able to be able to obtain from the department and in police training. It gives scenario-based trainings. And it switches up actually the counselors and the police officers. So the crisis intervention counselors role play, and they switch around with the different roles. Very good. It's very, the insight on it is very good. So that was one of the best programs. And we, again, be able to, in a small department, think about it. You're taking an officer out for 40 hours for training. Who fills those shifts, right? So we were committed in Lambertville to do that. And we continue to do that. So moving on, and decided for the bottom line of this last one is utilizing volunteers, right? So we've looked at this throughout the years. We used to use we had OEM volunteers, right? If you can go back to when I first started, we used to utilize the OEM volunteers a lot more. Well, times have changed, right? And we don't have the volunteers plus the training for the people that we just can't send people out to direct traffic and on their own. And it's just something that we can't allow. The state doesn't allow that anymore, right? You got to have certification to direct traffic anywhere. And plus, again, so we're transitioning, and I think the mayor's moving forward with this. It's part of the whole revamping of the emergency management and the CERT team, countywide emergency response team, which are volunteers, but they're trained to do the job. And if you notice on Shadfest, in the last 5 years, we've utilized a county CERT team. So you see the people at the persons with the vests on, with backpacks. They're usually at Coriel Street and Union, getting the cars and pedestrians across there for Shadfest. They're down assisting the officers at Bridge and Union Street. And that's a county CERT team. So we're looking to expand that service here in Lambertville, right? Trying to find volunteers that are willing to take the training, and so we can utilize actually residents from Lambertville. But it's going to take time to build. And any of these programs, even what we've discussed at the Human Rights Council meetings with Ronnie, we all have to build on this. It's going to take time. And so we just have to, again, have patience and stick to it. But that's where these are some of the suggestions I made and came up with the Human Rights Council, and to move forward. And it's a partnership in this. It's just not the Human Rights Council. It's not the police department. It's not the prosecutor's office. It's not the Attorney General's office. It's a partnership with all these programs. And again, whatever, and I can't say enough about Bambi and the assistance she gives us when we have to find somebody in the middle of the night, calling her up at 3 o'clock in the morning for housing, or if there's a mental health crisis where, again, a lot comes down to it. And again, having people from Lambertville working on cases is very beneficial because they know the people, and they know the family members that are involved in it. So that's all, Mayor.
All right. Thank you so much, Lieutenant. I really appreciate it. Does anybody else have any questions for Lieutenant Brown's portion?
One quick one. Well, first of all, thank you so much for giving this some thoughtful contemplation, putting pen to paper here, the suggestions. It's very helpful. On the last one, the process for training, just out of curiosity, what's that kind of time commitment for folks to get trained for that CERT team?
It's pretty significant, actually. Oh, sorry, Lieutenant.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor.
So the CERT team certification is quite significant. There is beyond the training. I don't know what the exact hours are for the training, but then you have to do a certain number of hours where you're volunteering for in training, like, when the CERT team comes down from the county, it's not because it's an emergency, they're training for traffic control for an eventual emergency. So you have to do a certain number of those volunteer hours in training beyond the actual class itself.
And then you're certified or licensed in some fashion by the state?
Yes, and you're a part of an emergency management
Gotcha.
Response team. But we haven't had, members of the Lambertville community certified in quite a while. I believe Ribbons Harris is regularly certified, but beyond her, this is going to be an effort to really build up, the volunteer community to help us be responsive, not only in potential issues like this, but in potential flooding cases, blackouts, other ongoing Office of Emergency Management issues that we've seen in the city. Okay. Ronnie, I think we're going to kick back to you.
All right. Yes. So these are the Lambertville Human Rights Council 2021 goals. And as you see, several of them match up with the recommendations made for City Council, because it's how we would support the efforts. So, facilitating these annual events with Fisherman's Mark. And then also the second one is, essentially we're offering our support in reviewing city ordinances that could identify and recommend any changes to rules that are on the books that may oppress one group over another. For example, there was a question raised about ordinances that may limit like public participation of residents of a certain immigration status, or make like the behaviors that are associated with homelessness illegal in our municipality. Not saying that we know of these ordinances, but knowing that to review ordinances with that anti-racism, classism lens is important. And it's a dry and long task, but members are committed to doing that work and making those recommendations as needed. And then, you know, like really these community building activities, up until the restrictions of the pandemic, the Human Rights Council has really looked to host events that are, you know, about educating the public on various topics, but also just on helping neighbors get to know neighbors. And there's a lot of value to that I think, you know, we don't necessarily see. But certainly we miss it these days, and we can't wait to get back to that work. And then again, that last goal really speaks to the joint project where we would gather information about the crisis response team. So I wanted to make sure that it was clear that this is a collaborative effort. So, you know, from the Human Rights Council members, you know, I think we all thank you in terms of your even consideration of these recommendations and the ongoing work that is done every day, where we're trying to, you know, ensure human rights of all of our city's residents, the current residents and the future residents. So, you know, I think, again, it's ongoing work that we are committed to, and happy to partner with City Council on it.
Yeah, Ronnie, I just want to thank you, and Lieutenant Brown, thank you for all of the work that you guys are doing. I think that's a really important note to end here on, that this is not a one and done, that, you know, the council is going to review these recommendations and make, you know, I think some substantive changes to those recommendations. And then, you know, as we start to work to implement this work, not just in 2021, but in perpetuity, right? That this is a commitment that we're all making to continue to grow and learn and change in order to make our community a more welcoming and safe place to be. All right. So with that, are there any other questions or comments from the council? Ronnie, I'm going to ask that you stop sharing your screen.
Mm-hmm.
So hearing none, then at this point, we'll open up for public comment. I just want to make a couple of reminders for folks that all questions should be directed to the council, not to members of staff, that you have 3 minutes to state your case, and that we'll ask you, you know, we're going to try and limit the, if there's a direct question that can be answered by a member of council, we'll try and answer it, but that we're going to try and limit the back and forth. So with that, Tina, do you want to read the, we'll demote Lieutenant Brown and Ronnie. Thank you both for your time and your presentation tonight. And then we will open up for comment. Hold on here. There we go. All right.
I just waiting for my screen to come back. I just froze.
All good. Take your time.
Okay. So do you want me to start with the first hand?
Yes, please.
Alicia, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Good evening, Alicia Lerman, 101 East Blair Tract. I just want to make sure that when we look at some of these recommendations, and I appreciate the work that's been done, that we look at the services that are provided by NorWestCap with respect to case management, and that when we're looking at it for the city, Lambertville is sort of a standalone, so it's good that we have somebody who knows the residents, but on the other hand, I think that puts us out of the rest of the programming. So I think we should really maybe look at holistically around case management and what's the best solution for getting services for residents, especially bilingual residents, and really maybe look at making sure we're really interconnected to everything that's available for the residents that are there. Yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Great, thank you.
Philomena, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, this is Philomena Hanks. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm just calling to invite the council and the public to our Board of Education meeting on Monday. We have a meeting at 6 p.m. and the topic of facilities has been discussed over the last several years in South Hunterdon Regional School District. And at our upcoming board meeting, our superintendent will be doing a presentation for the community that includes possible solutions to our facilities challenges. And the Board of Education would like feedback from the community before moving forward. So we just wanted to invite you to attend our meeting at 6 p.m. on Monday. All the info is on the homepage of the school website. Thank you.
Oh, before you leave here, just to really quickly snag you on that, the city of Lambertville would be more than happy to send out I know that this is a really important issue for our community members. We'd be happy to send out an email to the city email blast with the information, because I know that this is directly is an issue that directly affects all of our community. So if you wouldn't mind sending myself, Cindy, and Tina any information you'd like to go to the city listserv, we'll get that out in short order.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
No problem.
Philomena, before you go, how many people can you have on your Zoom system?
Oh boy, that's a great question for our tech team. I know it's definitely more than 100 because we have an account that's definitely more than 100, but I don't know what it goes up to.
I think the next step up is 5. I think if you don't have 100, you probably have 500.
Okay.
But it would be a good idea to find out just in case.
Great, thanks.
Kelly, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, my name is Kelly Boulding. I live at 204 Brunswick Ave. So first off, I just wanted to say to thank Ronnie and Bruce and other members of HRC for their thoughtful work on these recommendations. I see several really positive things here, in particular, developing a non-police crisis response team, reviewing city ordinances through an anti-racist lens, and increasing communication with underrepresented folks in the community seem like positive next steps. That being said, I think that the recommendations from LPD include several reform measures that would add to the police budget without any demonstrable positive effects on communities who face the most negative impacts of policing. I've expressed this to the HRC, and I'll repeat it here, that the Black Lives Matter activists whose successful organizing over the past year has inspired this review are not asking for police reform or community policing. They're asking us to examine and reduce police budgets. So while obviously BLM is not a monolith, it's impossible to ignore the fact that the diverse organizers and groups leading this movement have converged around a message of defunding the police. And Ronnie alluded to this, but I want to be very clear that defund is not an austerity measure, but rather a strategy to reinvest resources away from policing and into other social services that concretely help the community thrive. So I think that this inquiry into policing in Lambertville can't be considered complete until the city does an investigation into the current police budget. So even undertaking a review with the goal of finding just 1% of the budget to potentially redistribute to other city services would be a start. And I think some of the ambitious initiatives recommended by the HRC could be funded this way. So when myself and others raised questions about recommending a budget review at HRC meetings, we were told that the HRC was not given the authority to make recommendations about the budget and that only the mayor and city council could do that. So my question for the mayor and council is, will you undertake a review of the police budget and involve the community in that process? And if not, why? Thank you.
Kelly, I appreciate your question. I will note that every year the city council and the mayor work on a review of all of our departments' budgets, and that we are committed to doing that in a, I would say, in a new and reinvigorated way in which we have been able to do that with the public. Between 2019 and today, we have a much more public budget system than we did in previous years. We are going to be starting our budget conversations in February of this year, and those will all be public conversations with all of the department heads and the council and myself. Then that will all then go into an introduction of our budget in 2000. Excuse me, an introduction of our budget in early April, and the passing of our budget, second reading and public hearing of our budget in May. So we intend to have a public conversation about our budget as we do every year, and that will include all of our departments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gianna, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, my name's Gina Corzin at 121 North Main Street. And my question was sort of, I have two questions. One was just making sure I understood fully, was the thing that the police chief was talking about referring to hiring new people or just training new people to become like managers? I forget the proper title.
Yeah, so I'll just answer that really quickly. Yes, so
Okay.
we're not planning on expanding the number of police in the community. This just gives more, we would just elevate members of our team to be managers to ensure that there was more oversight on our 24-hour shifts.
Got you. Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure because I had heard conflicting things, but got you. And then the other thing that was building off the previous commenter was just earlier in the meeting, I remember someone saying that Bambi really does a lot, with a little, and I feel like that's definitely what defunding the police would kind of mean, with our like police budget being, I believe, like in the 6 and above digits, which I remember was passed during the Black Lives Matter protests in Lambertville. And so just, some of that money, possibly going to people like Bambi or creating new second position of what she does, so she doesn't have to be on call 24/7 or can alternate, that kind of thing. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to mention really quickly here that, while I can appreciate that this is a national movement, I also just want to flag for folks that when we say things like defunding the police, what we're talking about in real terms is, members of our community, people who are in public jobs, are police officers who dedicated their lives to, the provision of service in the city of Lambertville. When we say things like defunding the police or abolishing the police, what we're talking about doing is firing them. So I just want to be really careful that we don't get wrapped up in sort of national conversations about slogans and but I do appreciate the comments tonight about looking for more access to public services. And I think it's been clear from the Human Rights Commission recommendations and from the police department that we are interested and willing to work on that access to service.
Yeah, just super quick. I think also beyond not just firing them, but also if not firing them, because I know we already have a small police station in town, so I understand that. But just, demilitarizing, owning like, getting new cars frequently, or, things that aren't mandated by the like greater county or New Jersey government. So I'm just saying that in addition, and I'm not saying that you are, insinuating that we should or shouldn't do that. I was just clarifying that it's like, can sometimes not just be firing. It could be like the goods and services that they like buy.
All right. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you.
Leah, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Leah Hunt. I'm from Stockton, but I've been working in Lambertville most of my life. First of all, I just also wanted to echo Gina's concern about calling defund the police like a slogan or something like that. It doesn't by any means mean that the public workers need to be fired. They could be retrained for other things. They could be doing other jobs. Anyway, my main concern was with the presence of police on the Human Rights Council. I think that's inappropriate considering the topic of police brutality. And, if you want people to be able to have a safe space to talk about their feelings on this issue, I don't think you should expect them to say it to a police officer. Also along those lines, while I haven't attended a Human Rights Council meeting, I've heard from many young people that there often isn't time to dig deeply into issues. And while I understand that, I think there should be more space being made for people to come together and speak deeply about these issues. Perhaps inviting experts in human rights, Black studies or abolitionist experts to join these meetings and really dig deeper into how the role of policing plays into a small town like this. As you guys keep saying, it's important to keep into context that this is just a small town, and while it does relate to a national movement, not everything happening on a large scale relates directly to Lambertville. But yeah, that's mainly what I wanted to say. That Lambertville spends 45%, I believe, on its police budget, and a lot of people complain about high taxes, with roughly half of it going to this antiquated system. We could be both saving money and helping people more effectively by directing these funds into alternative and preventative services. So that's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just really briefly, I've heard that statistic before. It is not correct that 45% of our budget is spent on policing.
May I ask how much?
I don't have the slice of our budget in front of us, but we have a $6.2 million budget, so it's a little less than 1/6.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would just add though, any set of people with any philosophy is welcome to organize events. It doesn't have to just be the Human Rights Council, and that organization has a certain mandate and has a certain agenda. So while we want to have as robust robust public communication and discussion as we can, sometimes these official meetings are not the best place to do the really deep digging. And so I would, deep digging. I would invite the defund the police advocates and the abolition advocates to, and I'd be happy to help put together events and talk about them. It doesn't have to just be at these city meetings. And frankly, 6 and 7 o'clock at night, actually, for a lot of people who might be going through some of what you're worried about, that's probably not a great time for them. So how do we make sure that we are making forums that are for everybody and available to everybody? And it can certainly be outside of official city meetings.
Okay. Tina, are there any other hands?
No, there. Oh, yes, one just went up. Paul, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Paul Stevens, 39 Quarry. I had a question that sprung out of Lieutenant Brown's presentation. And my question is, he had said that they'd been trying for years to hire somebody that was a fluent Spanish speaking police officer, and they'd been having trouble doing it. And I was just wondering what they thought the issue was, and whether or not there's something we can do to, I'm sure they're doing everything they can, but I guess what the issue is. And then the other question I had, he mentioned that they just hired somebody as of December 1. So does that take care of that recommendation now? Is that considered to be, and
So thank you so much for the question. The answer is that Lambertville is a small police department, and we have I would say a less than competitive police wage in comparison to other areas, particularly in Mercer County. We police departments that are looking for folks who speak who are bilingual are across the state of New Jersey. We're one of the most diverse states in the country and one of the most densely populated diverse states. And so police officers that are bilingual are in very high demand, and they often go to police departments that can offer them better, higher wages and better benefits than the city of Lambertville. So we often lose out on those qualified police officers who are bilingual.
and what about, did the recent hire then meet that recommendation, or is it, he's saying
No,
that they
this is an
need somebody?
right. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just trying to finish my question, so go ahead now.
I apologize. It was rude of me to interrupt. I had forgotten that your second round of your question. So no, this police officer has some limited Spanish, but is not a bilingual officer. Ultimately, the goal is to hire a fluent bilingual officer.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, apologies for the interruption.
Chris, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Chris Register. I live at 28 Elm Street. I want to make 2 points. The first is that I'm a little bit worried about some of the data that's been cited here. I've heard testimony from people of color in town that there have been incidences that they would describe as incidences with the police department that they would describe as incidences of systemic racism. And so the data that was cited seems to suggest that there's no systemic racism present in our town. And I will grant that we live in a special place, but I would stress that an absence of evidence is not an evidence of absence. And so it very well may be that the people of color who live in our community would paint a different picture if they were, if their perspectives were appropriately considered. So that's one consideration that I would like to bring up. And the second is, my understanding is that there's roughly 10 police officers in the department. It may be 11 now, given that there was a recent hire. How many of them carry firearms? So that's a question that I would raise, and I would suggest that it seems unnecessary that all of them carry firearms, given that most of the work that they do in our community is not requiring firearms. And I think removing firearms from some of the officers in our community would help prevent escalation and would help, I think, make many of the members of our community feel safer. So that's a policy that I haven't heard discussed, and it's one that I would suggest could be implemented, especially if it's the case that 10 or 11 of the officers in town are presently carrying firearms. Thanks.
So just a brief clarification here. The officer that was hired was just an officer that we were replacing an officer that had left. We have not increased our police department, and the carrying of firearms is a state mandate, but I appreciate the comment, and we will continue to consider all this as we move forward.
There are no more hands raised.
Okay, so with that, is there anything else that the council would like to add to this discussion?
This is important for us to discuss. I appreciate the public.
Hey, Councilman Sanders, oh, sorry, I saw a hand raised. Sorry,
Okay.
not anymore.
That's right. That's right. I just say I appreciate folks bringing their perspectives. It's good for us to hear that, and do appreciate Ronnie and Lieutenant Brown in the work of the Human Rights Council. I just wanted to thank folks.
Absolutely. I know that we've got quite a bit more work to do here, but I really appreciate the council's time on this, and I'm looking forward to continuing that work. Can I get a motion to close?
Mayor, should we just do public comment in the event that you have something about another topic?
I believe that was general public comment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was clear that that was public comment, but it does look like we have a hand here.
Okay. Would you like me to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Matthew, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, Matt Hansen, 105 Douglas Street. Sorry, I didn't realize this was also public comment. So my question isn't related to the great conversation that just happened, but I wanted to find out, there was an article about the Flemington Council not continuing the contract for the business administrator. And I just was wondering what that means for us in Lambertville now.
Yes, we had some issues fulfilling that position. It was a really difficult position to hire for somebody who had enough experience to manage 2 towns that needed business administrators. We were unsuccessful in being able to move forward and filling that position. Flemington felt like they needed to, that they would prefer to move forward without the city of Lambertville, that it may be easier for them to find a business administrator for just 1 community instead of for 2. So that's where we are now. It has not changed our trajectory here. We are looking for someone to fulfill that position. As we discussed in the previous year, we are open to looking at and are pursuing alternate options besides full-time staff, including BA consultants. And so we're still continuing to work with the headhunting group, the Canning group that we had worked with previously, as well as other BA consulting groups. And we're hoping to fill that position quickly. It has been a slog.
Thank you. And I remember there was a conversation at some point, or an ordinance passed, that we were going to partner, I think, the Borough of Clinton or someone to share a BA part-time. Is that happening now, or is that on pause too?
The Borough of Clinton.
I'm not sure. We were gonna share a BA with someone part-time.
Yes, that was the Flemington Borough.
Okay. Oh, okay. So I thought there was
No, we were going to have some part-time services from Clinton.
I'm sorry. Yes, that was the Borough of Clinton's BA who had originally offered those services. Upon sort of seeing the amount of work that was required of the BA in the city of Lambertville, felt that it was, this is a sort of indirect quote from him, that it was setting him up to fail, and that he didn't feel like it was appropriate to be able to just commit 10 hours in order to do that work. And so he decided not to pursue it. It was not that the city of Lambertville, we actively wanted to contract with his services. He felt that it was too much work.
Okay, thank you. And so the resolution, when it was passed with Flemington, the max we were going to contribute to the BA was, I believe, $70,000 cap salary. Is that
$90,000?
So okay, so we're $90,000 for BA is what we're looking for.
No, we budgeted $120,000 for a full-time business administrator. That's what we intend to keep in the budget, I believe, for next year. The reason that we could draw that down was because we were looking at a shared service agreement. That shared service agreement has fallen through. We are looking at alternatives like contracting with these BA consulting services instead to try and reduce that. But we're not at the point yet where we can say what the total amount is. What's in the budget now is $120,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Paul, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yeah, Paul Stevens, 39 Quarry. Hi, Mayor. I've gone back and I've looked at this chart that you used about Clausen property and the financing of it, and I'm having trouble making sense of it. I just want to make sure that I understand a couple of things about that. First off, it looked like you said that the debt service on that, the annual debt service was going to be $260,000 a year, roughly, okay, over 25 years.
Yes.
And you said that the tax impact, the annual tax impact on the average, house or property, I should say, was going to be 63 cents a year.
Sorry. So the average tax impact so there's a difference between tax impact and actually being taxed, right? So it's 63 cents for the debt service, but we are reallocating that 63 cents. So there's sort of zero net tax.
Okay. Well, I guess my issue's even more different than that, I guess, because when I hear what the annual tax impact from an average house would be how much of that tax that property is paying is going towards that debt service. And $260,000 of debt service works out to be about $127 annually per average property.
No. So
yes, go ahead.
So there's a simple way to calculate this, and I think we actually shared that in the public version of this.
Well, Mayor, so I'm looking at the public version, and I saw what you shared, but the issue is even your own numbers and past things that you've shared shows that for every $100,000 of debt service, the average impact on the average property is $49.
42 cents. 42 cents.
No,
for every $100,000 borrowed, it's 42 cents per average household.
Well, that's borrowed. I'm talking about the debt service,
Right.
which is the amount.
So for every $100,000 of debt service, a payment, it's not for, I'm sorry, Paul, I think there's just a brief misunderstanding here. I'm just trying to make sure that you really understand what's going on. It is not $49 a household. It is 42 cents for $100,000 borrowed.
And what I'm saying, so $100,000 borrowed is different than the debt service, and that's what I'm going by. And in spreadsheets that you guys have put out in the past for the 2020 budget, it was for every $100,000 of debt service that was in that budget, it meant $49 per average household.
No, it's for.
Tell you what, why don't I set up some time outside of this, and I can show you the spreadsheets and everything else, because this is a big difference. And that I think we need to be clear on this, because there are going to be a lot of issues that come up. But
sure, I'm happy to
talk about this offline and not bore everybody else with the numbers until we're square with them.
Sure, I'm happy to go over this with you, but I think it would be helpful to sort of think about this in a larger sense, right? Because what debt service is versus what money borrowed is, it's just a payment on the dollars borrowed. So if you think about it, there are 3,800 people in the city of Lambertville, or 1,900 some odd homes. If we borrowed $100,000 and had to pay it back, it would not be $49 per household, because $49 times $1,900 would equal much more than $100,000.
Well, if you borrow $100,000, if I take out a mortgage of $100,000, I end up paying more than $100,000 on that mortgage over the lifetime of it.
Certainly, but if you notice from the, I just wanted to quickly.
Let's get off.
Notice from the public statement, that the total amount also assumes a 4% interest rate, so that the payback includes the debt service and interest rate.
Yep, I know. I understand.
So I'm happy to go over this with you, but just to be very clear, if you borrow $100,000, it doesn't cost every house $49. That would be too much.
No, I know. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you pay back the debt, all right, there's going to be a charge every year for that debt service. And you've shown it on your chart of $260,000. Every year, the budget has to have that in there.
Right.
And to cover that, the average property has to pay $49 according to things that you guys have put out in the past.
Right.
So I will show
I
you
think
those.
it'll just be helpful. I'm happy to meet with you and explain this.
Yep, we'll set it up outside this.
Okay, excellent.
And Mayor, something Councilman Stegman and I have talked about is in an effort to address issues like just came up, we would like to work with you and figure out an appropriate external third party, not necessarily related to us, who can help describe this stuff generally speaking, so that then we can use that as a lead into our specifics, because there are, I'm not going to get into it, but even just hearing that exchange, I understand actually what you were saying and what he was saying, and it's never the twain shall meet. So I think that there's some baseline work we can do as a council to help build a base of understanding.
Yeah, so we actually had reached out to last year in an effort to get a third party member to present to the community advisory team and to the community. We had reached out to multiple members of the public policy department at Rutgers, Rowan, and TCNJ. We also talked to Brandon McCoy at New Jersey Policy Perspectives. We have reached out to I would guess roughly about 7 or 8 people to ask them to do this. I recognize that there seems to be, it doesn't really matter how many times I say something, it doesn't seem to sort of register with some members of the community. So I agree with you. If you have particular folks that are experts, I'm happy to go over who Councilwoman Urbish and I had reached out to through our network. Okay. So with that, can I get a motion to close?
So moved.
Or just sit here.
Second.
All right, Councilman Sanders, Councilwoman President, Council President Taylor for the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time tonight.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.